Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, The Future of Audit, Leverage Lean Principles and Workflow Automation to Streamline Your Business Process. First and foremost, we hope that you and your loved ones are happy, healthy, and staying safe. For today's webinar, Mark McAndrew, Director of Product Management, will discuss the benefits of leveraging lean principles and workflow automation to streamline business process, minimize risk, and deliver superior client service results. Before I hand it over to our presenter, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. Wolters Kluwer CCH is registered with NASBA as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE Sponsors. As such, we are excited to offer 1 CPE credit for today's webinar. A total of 3 polls will be conducted throughout the presentation, and you will need to participate in all 3 of them in order to receive CPE credit. If you experience any technical difficulties when trying to submit your poll response, please make sure you let us know in the questions pane. This way we can record your answer manually and get you your CPE certificate. Your CPE certificate will be sent to you in the email you used to register for the webinar within 5 business days after the session. If you do not receive your CPE certificate within 5 business days, please email us at marketing@xamsolutions.com. Please note, CPE is not available when viewing the on-demand version of this webinar. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenter by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll be sure to follow up afterwards. You will also have the opportunity to complete a survey about the webinar, our content, learning objectives, and more at the end of the presentation. This survey will also be sent to you in a follow-up email. We appreciate you taking the time to participate in that survey so we can continue to deliver meaningful content in future presentations. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mark McAndrew.
Alyssa, thank you very much. And thank you to those who have attended today's session. Hope it's a valuable one for you. What we plan to cover today, and specifically what I plan to go through beyond just general introductions, is we thought as part of this Lean 6 presentation specific to audit, tying that to the current workforce and workflow challenges being faced by our teams, by ourselves, by our firms, by our colleagues, by our clients, and the new landscape we find ourselves in. What we'll connect those to is strategies to standardize your business process within your assurance practice, Lean 6 principles. Now, while we're talking Lean Six Sigma, there'll be a focus on Lean with some of our examples today. We'll cover some Six Sigma concepts as well, but you'll see this presentation focus a bit towards the Lean side of Lean Six Sigma. And then ultimately bringing that Lean 6 mindset or approach to your business. And we'll wrap up with our interpretation of what we see between business process, workflow challenges, your workforce, the current landscape, and what we would call the next normal. And we'll wrap up with some Q&A. By quick introduction, my name is Mark McAndrew. I'm presenting you today as the Director of Product Management. I have spent my career in the CPA space, having worked at large regional and national CPA firms, and through workflow, scheduling, productivity, and outsourcing solution providers. I currently oversee and work with the firm management products here at CCH, and my goal is to apply a connection between the products that we offer, the data that's consumed in those products, the business and work process related to those products, and ultimately how that ties to tangible success for all of you. From a workflow and workforce challenge perspective, we'll dive in after Alyssa connects us to our first of 3 required polling questions for your CPE eligibility. Alyssa, please take it away.
Thank you, Mark. The first polling question is, what was your firm's biggest challenge over the last year? Remote or hybrid work technologies, staff scheduling needs, shifting tax deadlines, new legislation, or other. As a reminder, you need to complete all 3 polling questions in order to receive your CPE. We'll give you just about 30 more seconds to complete this polling question.
Great, Alyssa, thank you. And while the audience is participating in the poll, some readout of what we're seeing, or as I look in real time at what we're seeing, we do see remote or hybrid work technologies being a core focus, but ultimately, as we think about staff scheduling and the shift in tax deadline, that's consuming about 60% of the biggest challenge focus of this audience. Now, that's not surprising. We'll talk in a moment about the shift in our workforce, the places of which they provide their services to their customers and engage their teams. But ultimately, what we're seeing, and where Lean Six and Lean Six Sigma principles have a great connection to, related to efficiency and throughput, staff scheduling and shifting tax deadlines to meet that compressed tax season is absolutely an area where we see the biggest challenge, and so too does this audience. So let's move now back to our primary presentation and keep going. So as we think about the last 12 months, or what we'll term the most recent tax season, understanding this is an assurance and audit audience, but knowing that audit, tax, accounting all tie together and have interdependencies, we wanted to share with you what we saw in the last 12 months across the board and provide you with some insight into the pace of the tax season. Just as a starting point, we saw that staff has juggled a number of obstacles, from unsurprising to most here, and probably something you've heard throughout presentations that you've participated in, new realities with stay-at-home orders, determining, depending on where you live, the remote work environment, or juggling a hybrid remote and office return to work environment, change in statutory deadlines, federal filing requirements, state-specific deadlines, or even internal SLAs and expectations of your customers, and determining how to handle those outcomes collectively as an engagement team and as a service line and as a firm. From a management perspective, remote staff and keeping staff has kept folks up at night, managing new staff schedules and how team members get work done from a remote environment, coupled with other expectations they might have as they work from home more routinely. And the new way to service clients based on that new climate, whether it's new relief legislation, PPE loan examples, or other elements where new services or advisory opportunities came to bear for you to bring to your market. Ultimately, maintaining that firm productivity, getting that utilization out of the capacity you have, ensuring you're aligning your talent to your engagements. But we really think of this as a true and full shift to a remote work environment, which was collectively not necessarily where the industry was as a whole, but where some of the more progressive firms or firms that weren't reacting exclusively to a change were headed or at, but an area where all of a sudden we all found ourselves in the same place simultaneously. So here's what we've seen. I do think it's insightful to show you some of the pace over the last 3 years within your tax line. I understand this is not a tax-focused Lean Six seminar today or overview, but I think it crystallizes what we see from a compressed season to get work done. Over the course of the prior 3 years, what I'd like you to see from an April standpoint is that as we look at the millions of returns processed annually through our products, the start point at the beginning of April, the inventory has gone up, the in-process work has waned a bit, and getting work completed by April has been increasingly more difficult, both because deadlines have shifted, which changes our priority or access to our customers, but also the way we engage our staff. I think in 2020, in the 2021 year, what we saw is as April 15th hit, more of that work not started and in process was starting to get completed. And when we hit the May deadlines, especially this year compared to last, which would have been a June deadline for tax, the completed work, while not connecting back to our prior normal, air quotes, prior normal, is that inventory of work being initiated, scheduled out, or reacted to. There's been a dramatic change since 2019, the calendar year. I believe this holds true for more than tax as it hits your audit teams, the way that they approach field work and other elements of getting that work done, the draft financial statements put together, approved, final financial statements out the door, and those binders closed. We see similar pace concerns or compressed periods for those customers as well. Well, why are we so busy these days? What's interesting, and as you need to take, and we'll get to concepts around leaning out your business process, creating KPIs and metrics to control the chaos and ensure that you are getting an outcome you expected when you started a business process overhaul. There are 5 generations currently in the workplace, each of them with their own unique perspectives of technology, what it should do for you, and ultimately how that technology, business process, and people engagement come together from a people, process, and technology standpoint. But also the pace of business continues to increase. And with that increase in business, the expectations of your customers, the interconnectivity between the audit teams, the tax teams, your accounting teams, the tax teams, the need for resources, managing those resources in a distributed workforce has created new roles for individuals to manage people differently, manage process to people available to do the work, create visibility in what those work opportunities are for your teams, but also compete with changes to priority or deadlines and changes and immediate reactions to changes to those deadlines, or ultimately just shifting focus around how to be busy and where to be busy related to the COVID-19 outcomes that we saw over the past 12, 16, perhaps 18 months. So to expound upon those workforce challenges a bit, and again, we're just setting the stage for how we'll apply Lean Six to our new approaches to getting work done. From the 5 generations standpoint, you'll see that we've categorized them similarly to what you might have seen in the past, but ultimately, each of these generations, they're in different layers of preparedness to work from home, and your firms may have helped teammates and individuals get further along in their own opportunity, whether it's new technology that you licensed, providing physical laptop monitor, multi-monitor opportunities at home office spaces. Different generations had different challenges from work from home standpoint. We need to take that into account as we start to look at the throughput times of getting work in process out the door and successfully completed for your customer. We need to take a look at how you iterate with your own team members to reduce loops and bottlenecks and get work done effectively. Keep in mind, please, that each of these generations are in different starting points related to their home office setup and their living in space considerations. Beyond that, within those generations, different individuals make up different roles at the firm. It's not something where Gen X are all partners, Gen Z are all managers. Different generations make up the partner base, the manager base, the individual contributors on an engagement, your administrative or operational staff, or those internal parts of your business like finance and HR. The reason I bring that up, there are different expectations at different levels. Partners who are allowed their own personal preferences for how they get work done, they impact downstream those individual contributors in how they complete their engagement work. If a contributor to your technology is serving many leaders with many different perspectives, what you're creating is personal preference, and personal preference is going to create chaos in effective business process. So looking at the different team members, the different levels, and what they need out of the organization is essential, but also connecting the partner group straight through to the admin group from an expectation standpoint of how work gets done and how we agree that work process gets done is essential. If we have different review standards for different team members, if we have different QC requirements that we're following and expectations of getting that done a certain way, well, we need to make sure that we standardize those expectations in a manner that allows your business to carry that forward successfully. So let's talk about the new landscape and what we're facing here. From shelter-in-place orders, closed daycares, uncertainty, or trying to always be on the cutting edge of technology, we see that from that distributed workforce standpoint, 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home multiple days a week by the end of this year. I think we're actually probably outpacing that projection from the Global Workplace Analytics survey done by Kate Lister. Now, the reason I say that, the technology you have in place, you need to optimize it. The way you're dialing in the technology you've previously invested in, you need to train it into your organization, you need to review its capabilities, and you need to get the utmost proficiency out of the tools you've deployed. But you need to review additional opportunities, both within your current vendors and those vendors you might be exploring. But do so in a way that accelerates the concept that working from home and the expectation your staff has might still be a reality. Here at the CPA space, I believe we're all going back into the office potentially more aggressively than some other industries, but you will still have that expectation that we got that work done the way we have in an amazing manner. We came together. We have an expectation perhaps that that will continue. So as a result, by early April of 2020, about 45% of workers said they were burned out, having to work through new, different, and similar ways of getting work done. People were getting a bit burnt out. So when we start to think about the generations, the way they work from home, the business processes they follow, the technology they connect to, the interplay between people, process, and technology, people were taxed. I'm not surprised to see that. That is certainly an area Firm Management Products hope to help alleviate. So what do we mean by that? Many people believe their job is now doable outside the office. Additionally, people who didn't embrace the technology choices of CPA firms, they're more comfortable using that technology today. But interesting enough, we see that through working remotely, 20% did report stronger relationship with colleagues. It's a bit counter to what I would expect. But now think about the way that you are collaborating within your technology, the way you are getting information to individuals, being proactive and providing context to requests, getting the right requests in front of the right people at the right time to take account for the right talent. These elements of how we engage the workforce will be how you look at business process, apply some Lean Six concepts to transform your business and get more out of the work you do and the work and throughput of that work to your customers in a successful way that delights them. So let's talk about standardizing business processes. And let's focus specifically to the audit challenge. We're going to talk through some phases of an audit here and different elements we see that are challenging so that we can start to look at how to apply business process optimization efforts to create projects that look at our processes holistically across the different dimensions of individuals that do that work to make sure that we are not just fixing one part of the problem, but we're taking that 30,000 client lifecycle view of a client through an audit engagement. Now, keep in mind, we're calling it the audit challenge. Understandably, depending on the markets you serve, your audit could have different requirements. So from a technology standpoint, be sure that as you look at technology to leverage, it can accommodate different types of process for different complexities of different styles of audits, comps, reviews, etc. But ultimately, here's what we're seeing. We'll go left to right, scheduling challenges, especially in a remote distributed environment, keeping an inventory of the skills you have from your individuals, connecting the skills of the individual to the engagements you have to staff, understanding the capacity you have to utilize your teams against the hours requirements for those audit engagements. We find people use Excel spreadsheets. We find people are getting more creative with Excel by adding it to OneDrive and having it be a living document. We find some individual contributors creating their own boards and sharing that through video training and sessions with their teams, and still others have sophisticated scheduling products, for example, XCM calendar-based scheduling. We have point of contact challenges. Well, gone potentially are the days where all of our team members sit in the same room in the field serving the same audit engagements collectively, where they can look across a table and ask for a status update, or where they can understand that the CFO is not available to take on any requests because they're out of the office, or they're shifting to a new team member, the same responsibility, or there are different individuals that can access the reports we need or the processes we need to analyze. Either way, the point of contact challenges are many, and your ability to centralize and configure those in a way that everyone can access them from anywhere at the same time become fairly essential. As we look at milestone challenges, do we have our rep letters on file? Is the engagement letter on file prior to going to the field? Are there consuming time update requirements that are really non-billable efforts to update your work logs, to give your managers or directors insight into the progress of engagements, to forecast when you're going to finalize planning, enter the field, exit the field, and wrap up an engagement, to provide your financial statement production team enough insight to forecast how much work is coming and when, whether it's your QC team members that need to understand how much work they have to review, or the style of work to review to find different individuals who review it, or it's your financial statement production teams that need to understand what needs to be put together, packaged, and sent out to customers, or binder close challenges. Perhaps it's a 45 or a 60-day deadline to close those engagement binders down to ensure that you followed protocol and process, and to make sure that as you roll forward to the next year, you carry forward relevant information that help that scheduling challenge hit the ground running in the next year of that recurring work. Either way, what we see from an audit challenge standpoint is that every focus in this circle or in this wheel, we need to ensure that you have visibility at all process levels. So any individual who needs to understand what's going on with their engagements, with their book of business, with their service line, with their industry group, with their team, with their firm, that they have visibility, that there's controls in place to ensure process is followed effectively, that there's flexibility across these processes to account for different profiles, that there's accountability of your teams and staff members to take what they need from the system and complete what's required of them. Ultimately, we see this productivity being enabled through our firm management products. But as you look at business process optimization, take each of these segments of your audit challenge collectively and look to optimize it. We're going to give you some tips today on how to do that. So within that audit lifecycle, or what we say would be the audit challenge, here's where you want to attack those challenges. If you have paper-based tracking processes or many different digital files that you're using to track, I consider those the equivalent. We need to determine how to transition from them into a more singular digital remote landscape. So if you have 17 different Excel files you attach to different emails, that's not necessarily digital. That's a process, but that's akin to a paper process routing across a floor by your facilities department from team to team. We see delays in completing jobs and responding to client requests. Ultimately, what are those client requests? When are they targeted? Who have we assigned to get that work done? When are they expected to complete it? How do we know it's done? We want to improve the manner in which we get that insight and that information, because the more time we spend asking people to complete a job, respond to a request, or provide us with an update, the more time they're asking someone else to do the same. 30 minutes for me to do something, passed down to 10 other people, is 30 minutes for each of them to do something as well. That's a waste of time. We want to get as much out of our technology as we can to eliminate that time waste. We want to eliminate variation in processes between employees. I called that personal preference earlier today. We want to document our process. Take a standard not-for-profit audit engagement, document the process. Is that different than your benefit plan audit process? Perhaps. If you have an SEC division, what are the requirements in that process? We want to look at them. We want to see what's repeatable. We want to see what's similar, and we want to work towards a common process with limited variations. Now, if there are review points that team members are constantly looking at, or there are questions that continue to pop up, we want to make sure we carry forward the right information without creating risk in carrying forward information. We want to make sure that team members who are rolled into an audit engagement, maybe covering for a team member who has left the firm or been moved to another engagement, can pick up right where that person left off. There's time waste in searching for that information. So we want technology to help us reduce that time waste. And then ultimately, we want to reduce the partner time spend as it relates to activities that aren't at the heightened level of their credential. We want that team member providing that detailed, comprehensive advisory service as opposed to living in the engagement binder to pick through work or to take on the activities of a team member that might be at a different level in the firm, more apt to do that type of requirement. So technology is going to help you with these inefficiencies, and building your business process effectively will help you take advantage of that. Now, when we think about taking advantage of your teams from a capacity standpoint, from a utilization standpoint, I want you to think about what decreases capacity. Right? So I just want you to think, I have team members. We talked about some of those inefficiencies in the prior slide. Well, what decreases capacity? An increased workload, perhaps. Regulatory requirements, changes, business growth initiatives. Perhaps I have less capacity to do work because I'm pounding the pavement to grow the business. It could be a period of time where I have too much work for a short period of time. We call that a compressed season. That's not just compressed tax season. That happens in audit as well. There may be merger and acquisition activity, and there's much of that in the CPA space, with some firms being brought into your practice with different business process that have to get acclimated to how you do business, or vice versa. Ultimately, all of that decreases capacity, it increases workload. That plus dysfunctional process, lack of work expectations in the planning phase. What specifically are we required to do, and who on the team is required to do it from a level standpoint? It might be ineffective or no business process. Maybe we don't have a planning phase. We just jump straight to field and we wing it. Well, that's a way to get work done, but perhaps you need to identify different activities in your scheduling process, your planning process, your field work process, your wrap-up process, your interim work, and ultimately access meetings, email, and Excel. If every meeting is for a status update, every Excel file is for an update from the last week we completed it, or you're just digging through email from a communication standpoint to figure out if you have an answer, there might be different technology out there to help you. I'm sure many of you have explored it. You want to dial in the use of it. And then manual process management. This is what we collectively add together as dysfunctional business process. What will that do? Ultimately, it will create bottlenecks. Between getting as much work done as we can through dysfunctional processes, ultimately we might see that too much work hits the door for a specific individual and we're fighting to get through it. Whether that's submissions to your financial statement production team and their prioritization of who gets that work done, whether a draft is more critical than a final financial statement, whether you have the right approval layers on file and multiple individuals have similar expectations of completing that work. Ultimately, we want to identify where these bottlenecks are created and increase the capacity of those team members in that business process to flow more work through that part of your process as effectively as possible, so we're staging it to get that work done efficiently with a limited amount of rework. So when we think about workflow elements, there's 6 key practices I want you to focus on. When we think about leaning out your process, especially standardization, you need to establish your process because the work becomes repeatable. Sounds simple, but if you don't know what your process looks like and you don't have a toolkit in place to figure that out or a technology to memorialize your decisions, standardization of business process becomes difficult. Delegation. It's not always your responsibility to get work done. And in some cases, individuals believe, I'll just do it. It'll save me time. It'll save the team time. I'll just get it done. While that togetherness aspect of helping a team member get work done makes sense, we need to make sure we're delegating effectively. Communication. People are sitting and waiting. It's called wait time. Wait time is going to increase that dysfunctional business process and start to bottleneck up that element of the end of your process. So we want to make sure that communication, important task-related information is available. Take that example of a new employee onboarding process. You want to get them engaged out to a customer and deployed on engagement quickly, efficiently, so they can be a contributing member of the team. If we have proper communication process in place for those audit engagements, they should be able to patch themselves into that process quickly. Work can be delegated to them, and there's some predictability in how that work is spread out and how those individuals fit into the different audit engagements they're now allocated to. Ultimately, collaboration and visibility. I say visibility is really key here, especially from the management level, whether it's the partner, the service line leader, the industry group lead, the manager or director in charge of a number of engagements. Having on-the-spot access without having to synchronize information together or ask for updates, that you have real-time visibility always into what's happening is important. Our technology can help there, and building your business process and iterating against improving upon it is crucial to the success of any deployment of these technologies. So now let's focus the concept of how we're working together, the challenges we're all facing, and the way we need to ensure that we have effective business process in our audit world. Let's put that now into somewhat of a Lean Six Sigma process. Now, before we do that, Alyssa, I'm going to turn over another polling question.
Thank you, Mark. The next polling question is, what is your top efficiency challenge? Lack of standardized process, long turnaround time caused by inefficiencies, not enough staff during busy season, or other? Again, this is the second of 3 polling questions. You'll need to complete all 3 in order to receive your CPE. Just give about 10 to 15 more seconds.
Sure, and while I see the responses coming in, I know you'll share the outcome for the team, but I'll give some real-time information there. We're seeing long turnaround time and not enough staff really leading the way here. It's really a spread, even to other, meaning we should be asking the question a bit differently. 12% of you have said there are other obstacles in place. Perhaps that's all of the above, or it could be something completely different. But ultimately, when you think about standardizing that process, long-term turnaround time caused by those inefficiencies of not having standardized process and not enough staff. What we're looking to do is increase your staff capabilities. So while you might not have enough staff, if you have more consistent process with limited turnaround time and delay related to inefficiencies, that same staff can be deployed more effectively to more engagements. That's not a do more with less mindset. It might sound like it. What that is that saying, if we're efficient and we're getting work done and we have some repeatability to the work we're doing and people understand their part of the process and what to expect, we can delegate a bit more effectively. We can handle multiple engagements where we might otherwise have been focused to one. And we can get more work done during a compressed period of time and still spread that out effectively so that we're not overloading individuals with requests. So I think all of these play together nicely, but let's move forward now from the polling question back to our presentation today. Let's provide a high-level overview. So many of you might be familiar with Lean Six Sigma. These are not new concepts. In fact, I've been working with XCM workflow products and now CCH workflow products for about a decade, and we've pushed green belt, black belt, Lean Six Sigma concepts since I began my journey with the company as the head of the services organization. Now, what we mean by this is let's apply it more directly to a CPA space, right? It's not just about automobiles and assembly lines, but now it's about the CPA style of work. And we know that many of you have explored how to take these principles forward in your business related to how you're servicing your customers. But let's look inward for a moment. Let's think about Lean Six Sigma. And let's start with Lean. Lean is velocity, right? It's making a process more efficient. Well, how do you make a process more efficient? You have to understand your process, document your process, listen to the individuals who contribute to your process. It's about gaining capacity in that process. We talked about wait times. We talked about spreading the work effectively so you can do more with your teams based on what's available to be done. But it's also about speeding up the throughput of a process. Now, speeding up throughput doesn't mean prepare something as quickly as possible to get it to the next step, because ultimately that doesn't speed up a process. What will happen there is the reviewer will have such a low caliber item to review, there'll be rework. That rework will be sent back to that preparer. We'll make that process elongated. We'll reduce capacity to get work done. So there's a give and take on how fast you're getting work done and the right way you're getting that work done through that process. And we see Lean as velocity. Think of Lean as velocity. Now, Six Sigma as quality. As mentioned, if I get preparation work done quickly, could be good, could be bad. As long as that quality is high, then moving it through the process quickly is effective. We want to make a process that rarely produces defects or quality issues. I'll use some examples in a moment about where you can focus, whether it's the entirety of your audit or a laser focus on a phase within it. But ultimately, making that process effective in a manner that reduces defects, increases quality. Internally, your team members in the QC standpoint will be delighted by the fact that what they're reviewing, the highest quality, following the appropriate processes, the standardization of how that's done, improves their life internally with their review processes. Externally to your customers, you're getting a draft financial statement in that example that's pretty much ready to go. There might be questions about what's there, but not in the accuracy of what was done or following your QC process effectively through that effect. Higher quality is going to increase customer service. Ultimately, higher quality work opens new doors and inroads for more services you can provide your customers. On the Six Sigma side, we want to remove variation as much as possible. Personal preference is the phrase I'm using, and it will kill your productivity. You allow someone to say, well, I've done it this way for 35 years and the business has grown the way I've done it. I think I'll pass on that new approach to our technology investment or how we're going to look at business process. If you allow that, but then aside from that individual, you move forward with your approach, you now have team members with two different business processes to memorize. What they do for 99% of the business and what they do for that one individual with that personal preference is allowed. So you want to have executive sponsorship on any of these improvement opportunities. It's important that you're all invested in that change and you understand the impact to the business, not just the individual. Well, why Six Sigma? We want dramatic improvements in quality, not just small incremental improvement. We want quality to improve, productivity of the team member producing that quality, and then ultimately the service we're providing our customers. We want dramatic improvements. So we want to look at the biggest bang for our buck when making a change to technology, making a change to process, making a change, right? We want to improve that process. We want to pick the right areas to improve. We want to focus on customer satisfaction. You could improve a step in your process, but if the outcome is there isn't a single individual who's satisfied by the outcome, externally or internally, well, you've improved something just for the sake of doing it. That's not the approach here. We want to put ourselves in a superior competitive position. If we can get more work done effectively, if our customers see that we have a very specific way of doing things and we have our act together, well, we have a competitive position over our customers or our competition related to servicing those individuals and getting that work. We want to reduce cost. If we can dial in the technology we have, improve upon it. We don't need to invest in new technology. We need to improve what we have. If there's a specific piece of technology we do need, we want to evaluate it, determine that it does what we need it to, and then max out the return on investment related to reducing that cost from an investment standpoint. We want to have greater wealth and prosperity for the firm. I think that is pretty evident. We want to grow our business. Now we have a quote here from Jack Welch. I like to think he's pioneered a lot of the Lean Six concepts as he brought it to GE or was invested in doing it with GE. But ultimately, we want to improve our business process in a way that all of our team members buy into those outcomes. So let's talk about Lean Six Sigma, the Lean side of things. We're going to focus here for a bit. We talked about those challenges of a standardized process. Well, what is it? How do I get an audit done? Who gets the audit done? Who are the constituents we're focused on? Where does an audit engagement truly start? Is it acceptance and continuance? Is it in front of that phase? Is it after that phase? Where does that process start? For recurring work, I'd say the process is actually initiated at the tail end of the first year, right? First time through work will be a little inefficient compared to recurring work. Well, anything you carry forward in that, any insight you have in improving upon that work, flowing it through your process effectively, that might be the start of your business process. We know that there are challenges with turnaround time caused by those inefficiencies. Well, we're going to lean it out. So when I say leaning out, we're going to map out the process, document standardizations, and standardize those process opportunities. But again, we don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it. We want to identify top sources of inefficiencies and make necessary changes. We know that we need to get more utilization out of our level ones and level twos, our associate level team members, and we get them aligned to the appropriate engagement. We want to lean out that part of the process. We want the outcomes and solutions to be that we create standardized approaches. I'll use the phrase checklist. It's a little misleading. We're not looking to create a document you just check things off in, but ultimately we want to create those standardized processes so people know what to do and when. And we want to eliminate the waste in that process. Let's talk a bit about how software fits in, but also how you lay out a process. So from a lean standpoint, lean equals velocity. What you're seeing here, no matter the technology you're using, you want to be able to lay out a business process and have technology help control it. If in your initial planning phase, you have client acceptance and independence assessment, budget preparation, engagement letter requests, if during a review of your planning phase, there are certain activities you got to check the box off and make sure you hit. If there are elements within field work to reduce risk where you need to know the engagement letter was received prior to entering the field, any number of elements of what your process and the detailed elements within the process, you want to make sure that you have a software that can control these, ideally automate these, provide reporting characteristics off of these, and make sure that your team knows the role they play against the phase of that audit and those specific items that are required during that phase. So you go from right to left in this view. Do you have a piece of software that can identify the role related to the phase that audit's in, related to the specific activity done in that phase? Now, I am not challenging you to find software that can take an engagement binder and an entire work paper program and say, we are going to assign cash, AR, AP, all the different elements, right? That might be an obstacle you have. But when we think about proper planning, proper budgetary control, understanding what is required, there might be higher level phases in that planning status or planning element of your job that you need to be able to look across audits and understand. Think of yourself as someone with a book of business in charge of 100 audits. How many of those audits have successfully gone through planning, have an engagement letter successfully out to the customer, have a budget successfully prepared? Now you can go into a binder, check it down, and look to see what you have, or there could be systems that provide insight into all 100 simultaneously and tell you who's doing what the expectation or issue is, and your ability to overcome that with them. So software fits in from a process standardization standpoint. Well, how do we create that process? Let's bring that Lean Six into your business. This will be a polling question before we dive into how to architect your business process using Lean Six principles. So Alyssa, let's go with this polling question.
Great, thank you, Mark. The last polling question is, when are you thinking about implementing Lean Six Sigma principles? We have already started implementing, as soon as possible, in the next 1 to 3 years, not sure or not planning to implement, or other. We'll give just about 10 to 15 more seconds to complete the third and final polling question. As a reminder, you'll need to complete all 3 in order to receive your CPE certificate.
Perfect. Now, as the insights coming in, just to give some real-time stats here, we have a decent amount of, we're not sure. We're not yet planning to implement, or perhaps they're uncertain about what they would do next because they haven't gotten that far in the presentation. But we do have some individuals who said they've started their Lean Six efforts. Now, what I see oftentimes is buddying up with some consultants in the marketplace or internal champions who have previously gone through some programs related to becoming a green belt certified Lean Six team member. Some of you might be black belt certified. Oftentimes a green belt will, these like karate, I'm a green belt, I'm a black belt, but the green belt will have an understanding about Lean Six principles and how to deploy those to a project internally. If you have one of those as a champion, you're in a good spot. If you don't, there are courses out there you can take or consultants who can advise you. And if you're implementing products like XCM Workflow, the consultants who implement those products are Lean Six certified and have the ability to walk you through optimizing a business process at a very condensed Lean Six level. We won't go through a multi-month process or a high-touch process, but we'll take the advice we've seen across the board and apply that into what you're doing and allow you to make the right decisions. So let's move on now from the polling question and get back to our presentation. So we're going to talk about Lean Six Sigma methodology. DMAIC is kind of the phrasing. If you think of DMAIC, D-M-A-I-C, DMAIC. Ultimately, in your project, as you're laying out what you're looking to optimize, you're going to define, measure, analyze, improve, and then control. Those are the phases of what you're going to work through. And in each phase, there's toolkits available and type of approaches you can take to ensure you're following the path to improvement effectively. When you're defining the project, maybe it's optimizing your audit process. You're taking a 365-degree view of audit, or 360-degree view of audit, sorry. You're going to define what that means from a process standpoint. That's a project description. You'll develop a team charter. We have examples of these. Happy to share them with you after this session if you need some generic toolkits to get you started, right? But if you look this up, you're going to look for defining your project and developing a cohesive team charter so people know what you're looking to do in that project and the roles and responsibilities people have. You're going to measure. This is where you're going to make a process map. I'm going to show you an example of value stream mapping in a moment. There are different types of tools in the tool belt for you to leverage when you're measuring against your process. How long does something take? Is it critical to improve upon it? So you can start to measure your process, take a look at how elongated it is, and where potentially you have some waste. That's where you're going to analyze the process you've now mapped out. When you analyze that, you're going to follow some themes. These themes or these tools will ultimately help you identify waste in the process and the specific waste in the process that you should look to eliminate, as opposed to just the first thing you've seen. It'll help you identify bottlenecks or wait times, whether it's wait times for you sending out PBC lists to your customers and knowing when you have enough back from the customer to go into the field, or it's ensuring that internally Your teams have signed off on all the initial planning steps, or they've gotten certain information out the door at the right time so you can begin your part of the journey. You're going to analyze where you have those wait times, those waste areas, or those bottlenecks, and improve upon it. When we say improve, you're going to make sure that perhaps from a scheduling standpoint, you're managing the front door. It's a phrase we use, manage the front door. Audit engagement is ready to be scheduled. Let's make sure that we are bringing that into the scheduling process at the right time based on having the right information so we can start to allocate resources. You're going to bust the bottlenecks. Maybe from a financial statement production standpoint, you have certain bottlenecks in how that work gets to the individuals that can take on that work. You're going to look for a consistency or time goals in that. And you're going to control it. That's where the technology comes into play. You have a summary of the future state you want. You're going to present that future state to your team. You're going to train them up on the improvements you've made. You're going to have metrics in place. Maybe it's you have a 45-day service level agreement of we exit the field and we want the financial statement out the door. Whatever your target might be, that's a metric. You need to be able to control the process so that you can determine if that metric is going to spotlight an inefficiency to continue to focus on. I'm going to gain buy-in from the champions, from the firm, to make sure we're all following the same process and we're not a slave to personal preference. And then you're going to annually improve upon that or periodically improve upon that. Technology will help analyze and then improve upon your process to control it, but you should have metrics in place from that technology to spotlight where future improvement is capable to be had, and that's where your next step will be. So let's think about defining project charter. This is going to help improve something. This might be a return process or a financial statement draft process. You're going to have goals that you're going to lay down. You're going to have a team. So when you're defining your project or have a project charter, you have goals that you're looking to overcome. You're going to have teams related to that. If it's tax work, you want tax preparers. If it's audit work, you might want a master scheduler. You might want a financial statement production team member. You might want a QC lead. So you want to make sure that everyone's represented. From a measure standpoint, get into a room together, or you can do this through a virtual whiteboard. We're going to just lay it out. Every single small step in the process, lay it out. Make the 1,000-mile journey across your audit engagement, every possible step in that process, place it on the board. No step is too small to document. So you're going to measure what your process looks like, whether it's an internal decision point, a waiting point, a client action, a data input, a process step, right? So you're going to look at what it is in the process you're doing, who's doing it, if there is delay in getting it done, because ultimately you're going to analyze that. And here's an example of analyzing. I'm going to use tax return as our example. But if we think about wait time and bottlenecks, you can apply this to the production of a financial statement as an example, preparing that financial statement, fixing prep issues found in review, and then sending out that draft or that final financial statement. In that analyze, what you're looking to do is determine, can we bring anything forward in the process? If so, that drags the rest of the process forward potentially, which by doing that increases that capacity to do more. So what you're trying to find when you're measuring ultimately is where in the process can we improve upon it? Can we reach out to a client earlier in the process? Can we collaborate with them and engage with them differently to get a different outcome? Is there a piece of technology that we could use in our workflow from a collaboration standpoint that publishes information out to a customer automatically and gets them engaged earlier, or identifies when there's an obstacle and pushes schedules out so that we're not last minute rescheduling and sending an email out to the company to say these people are now available, can you pick them up? Ultimately, when you analyze that process you put on paper, on a whiteboard, in your virtual whiteboard room, however you're doing it, so you can start to rework that in a way that increases capacity to do more work. Well, when you improve upon it, lay out the process. This might be an example of your audit process, from scheduling straight through to closing the binder and completing that for rollover. Lay out the steps in the process. So once you lay them out, you can eliminate the steps that don't matter to improve that process. And that process is what you're going to lay out to your team, place into your technology, load up into a workflow or scheduling platform or productivity platform, and be sure that you can then report against those stages and identify where there's inefficiency. So you're going to improve your process, lay it out. Here's an example of improving financial statement production process. In this example, we see that we have benefit plan partners, audit partners, senior managers or managers, and all of them contribute the same way. They're submitting requests. Those requests go to a specific set of individuals, typically technical reviewers, your QC team members, production resources. You have assembly instructions, delivery instructions, draft or final copy instructions, review requests for clearing information out, revision requests on those drafts when they get returned back from the audit committee or the customer. But ultimately, if everyone's doing it differently, I have an Excel file for my assembly instructions. I send you an email to an inbox you monitor, and we have new team members that don't have access to that inbox and someone on vacation. Ultimately, every step along the way, you want to determine that everyone's following the program, the same consistency in how we provide instruction, the same manner of how we submit, prioritize, the same manner of how we obtain for review, and the same manner in which our production resources understand the investment of them in the process and where they make the biggest impact. So we want to really improve upon that production process as an example of laying out your process, zeroing in on a segment of that process, and dialing in to improve that through technology and improving your business process. You want to control it. You want a summary of your future state, whether that's documentation about questionnaires you're going to ask your service providers, whether it's training and guidelines they're going to follow, whether it's the way you collaborate and schedule and then flow through your workflow process, whether it's the type of technology you use with our customers, using the same technology for each customer where possible, whether it's a document that lets you know you're doing things effectively. You want to have a summary of your future state because that's what you're working to control. I will get draft financial statements out the door quicker with less rework, and our expectation is a gold standard of X number of days. Until you have that down, you can't control it. Once you have that known, your process is what will flow through for that control, and your ability to report out of it will show you if you're being successful or if you have more work to do. So some key takeaways. You want to define your roles. You want to challenge the status quo. We don't do it just because it's been done and we've grown the business. You want to challenge why you do something. Challenge your service providers to show you creative ways of using their technology. Have them audit how you're using it and determine if there's feature sets you're not aware of. Don't be afraid to ask why. Whether you're a new team member, you're part of an acquisition and you're just not used to the process, or you've always wondered why you've done something a certain way. Sometimes just asking why and doing it multiple times yields pretty significant results. And again, that personal preference, that's an enemy to efficiency. Don't allow one team member to do something different than everyone else. I want to have consistency. And work on continuous improvement. If we are laying out a process and you've identified an opportunity, but it's not something for immediate focus because it has a lower bang for your buck or return on effort, put in a parking lot. Don't spend too much time talking about it, but acknowledge it's a good idea, or at least an idea. Put in a parking lot, talk about it when you do a review or a post-mortem of your project. And then continue to collect ongoing insights from your team members. But ultimately, you want to eliminate the waste in your process and gain control over your engagements, your teams, and your business. Technology is going to support that evolution. Whether you have work allocated to your top staff where it shouldn't be, you have bottlenecks where you could have identified the issue ahead of time, there's a review sign-off and quality of work obstacle, or you just don't know what's urgent versus what's important. Here's an example of a tool, effective collaboration. Real-time visibility to all activities. How many audits do we have in our assurance practice? What stage are they in? If you have a tool in place that can tell you this, you're on your way. Make sure that you have very similar examples. In this case, it's an audit. There are 6 of them. They're all audits, and they're all in different layers of statuses. Well, you might have to differentiate your benefit plan audits from your not-for-profit audits to your not public audits, whatever it might be. But you want to make sure that you have very simple ways to know what's happening. Here's an example of how that might look in an XCM workflow system. You want to be able to take the data out of your process and analyze it. Who's got tasks assigned to them? What are their levels? Are they doing the right work? Can we drill into any of this? Determine how long it's been sitting, if we're blowing budgets, if we have a longer estimated time to complete than expected, if we're leveraging the wrong team member in the wrong role and getting the wrong billing results. You can't measure it, you can't improve it. So make sure that you can pull data out of your system and analyze it in specific ways. This is an example of data being pulled out of the XCM product. You need to know how long work is sitting. Bottlenecks might be caused by delay. They might be caused by too much work finding their way in the process at one time. Well, being able to look across physical locations, virtual locations, remote areas, specific departments to determine if I click into this, Dallas has 2 audit engagements sitting for 2 to 5 days. Click into that, see what they are. But ultimately, build some SLAs internally. How many days do we expect open review points to sit, and how many tasks are past that process? How many days in assembly, waiting for signature? You pick the stages, the statuses, and build some thresholds of how long you should allow work to sit. And ultimately then manage against it and identify those outliers that need some support or assistance. We have a customer of ours, PSK, it's a case study of this customer, and they went through their own journey with improving their business process and leveraging XCM as an example for controls. And if you'd like to learn more, there is a full case study available on them. But to give you a quick highlight in the last couple minutes we have today, ultimately, as you start thinking about submission processes, draft requests, proofreading requests, report revisions, building a repository, and this isn't their site specifically, I wouldn't show you that, but this is some examples where as we think about administrative heavy tasks, draft requests, proofreading, report revisions as examples, well, is our system in place where everyone is submitting them to the same spot? The right team members are monitoring the right views? The instructions we have and need are available within the system, and we're off to the races to get that work done effectively. Work comes in, work is received, acknowledged, and completed. Are there redundant processes related to sign-offs where you're going to multiple systems to sign off? Is there a way to leverage information from one system to carry forward into another system where team members are working? Maybe you collect sign-offs in your engagement binder and you want to bring them into your workflow system so those team members who aren't in the engagement binder still have visibility into what's happening within the engagement binder from a sign-off standpoint. Or perhaps it's vice versa, taking your sign-offs to another system from your workflow system. If I'm submitting a report to be prepared and I prepare it, on its face, that's something that gets signed off in the system where that request comes in, where that instruction is available, where those documents are linked. But then ultimately, there's relevant information that might be necessary for different report purposes. Are you capturing it in the right systems? Are you bringing it all into a centralized location or an area for you to report against? So start to consider the different type of information you collect along the way and where its value exists for different team members. And as we wrap up for today, we want to think about the next normal, the current normal, the future normal, the abnormal nature in which we've done work over the past 18 months, but ultimately having technology in place as the glue that connects your process, as the ribbon that flows your systems together in a way that's cohesive, as a way to make sure that you have a business process, a productivity solution. We're going to make sure that you're able to take advantage of getting work done no matter where you are. So just some stats as we wrap up, and Alyssa, I'll turn it over to you in a moment. We're running to the end of this session. So Alyssa, let's wrap up in the last couple minutes we have together. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Mark. I'd like to thank everyone again for attending our webinar. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. We are very excited to be hosting part 3 of our Future of Audit webinar series. During this webinar, Jim Bork and Jamie Bellinger will discuss key technology considerations for firms managing distributed teams. We've included registration details on this slide, and we do hope you're able to join us. With that said, as we have reached our allotted time, we will not be taking any questions. If you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them to marketing@xcmsolutions.com. This does conclude our webinar. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.